Actually, that's the name of the Archaim Kodesh. But the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu is referred to as Ish Elokim is because he quotes the Gemara in Erchin that the only person who was able to tolerate and deal with and be evaluated on the evaluation of Midas Adin was only Moshe Rabbeinu. You find that it's very interesting. The Gemara tells us in Avodah Zorah that a person should not daven musaf as a private citizen, meaning not within a minyan, during the first 3 hours of the day. Why? Because since the first 3 hours of the day is din, the evaluation is exactness. So when you daven musaf and we mentioned Zechronos, we want to be remembered in the good vein, since the scrutiny and the evaluation is so exacting, unless you have schus hatzibur, you should not say musaf privately during the first 3 hours of the day. That's what Gemara says. So Gemara asks, when it speaks about HaKadosh Baruch Hu's schedule, it says the first 3 hours of the day, Hashem, whatever this means, sits and studies Torah, Kavayochel. The second 3 hours a day, he judges the world. So if that's the case, the Gemara should say you should not say Musaf as an individual during the second 3 hours a day, because Hashem judges the world. But during the first 3 hours where he studies Torah, it should not be a problem. Versus no, it is a problem. Why? Quotes a pasuk in Nishlei that when Hashem studies Torah, what exactly is Torah? Emes Kinei Gal Tinkor. Emes Kinei. You should purchase truth, don't sell it. Since Torah is truth on the absolute level, as a result of that, that's the ultimate in din. Torah is din. When Hashem judges the world, it's not absolute din. There's place for rachmim. Therefore, if you say the musaf as an individual, it should be during the second 3 hours of the day, not during the first 3 hours, because Torah is din. Okay. Before we get to Moshe Rabbeinu, we find that initially, when the Torah begins, is Bereshis Bara Elokim Eisa Shemayim V'Soretz. Elokim created heaven and earth. So Rashi cites the famous Medrash Chazal that initially Hashem wanted to create the world with Midas Adin, but because he saw the world, mankind is prone to fail, the world would not be able to survive. Therefore, he coalesced into Midas Adin, Midas Arachmim. Therefore, we see when he created Adam, it says Hashem Elokim. Yud Kei Vav Kei is the Midas Arachmim. That's Rashi. So we asked the question, and we'll begin Bereshis very soon. When we speak about evaluation of a person, you say, how do we audit the record? Is it with precision, exactness, or there's some level of flexibility? So we understand that's Midas Adin, Midas Arachmim. But if we're speaking about creating the world, what does creating the world have to do with Midas Arachmim, Midas Adin? The world initially was created with Midas Adin, but because the human being was part of that, but why does the world have to be created with Midas Adin? What's Midas Adin? So we explained that what is the objective of creation? The objective of creation is that this is the setting for all challenges which has relevance to the Torah. Just as the Torah itself, there's nothing superfluous in the Torah. The Torah is Torah Hashem Temima. It's perfect. It's exact. There's an exactness to it because truth is exact. Identically, the world being the setting for all the challenges of the Torah for its fulfillment, it has to reflect that exactness. So there's nothing superfluous in creation. Everything is exactness. So if everything is exactness, that is the criteria it has to meet. So if that's the case, that's midas din. So its application would be when I evaluate the human being, it's also with exactness. Because everything in the world reflects the truth of Torah, and Torah is emes. And emes is exactness. If you compromise truth as much as Nayara, as we mentioned name in the Maral, if you take Aleph away from emes, what's left? Mem Tov. Mes. Even the smallest infinitesimal part of Torah, if you compromise it, it's not emes any longer. As a result of that, when Hashem studies Torah, the audit, the evaluation is on an exact level. So unless you have Schus HaTzibur, you should not say Musaf as an individual. That's the Gemara. Now, what was Moshe Rabbeinu's? What was his midah? What was his attribute? We find Moshe Rabbeinu's attribute was din. Where do we find it was din? We find the first display of that behavior was Moshe Rabbeinu was a prince, the adopted prince of Paro. He was the adopted son of the daughter of Paro. Comes out as a young man, and he sees, and he wants to see how his brothers are faring. And he sees an Egyptian beating a Jew. And what does he do? Immediately he kills the Egyptian. But don't you realize, being the only possible advocate for the Jew in the palace, Moshe Rabbeinu, you can't do anything which may put that position in jeopardy. Moshe Rabbeinu sees something which is not acceptable. There's no calculation. Din says the man has to be killed. That's justice. He has to be killed, and Moshe killed him. He comes out the next day. Two Jews are fighting. One lifts his hand to the other. This is Das Navirim. And he says, Rosh Lamatakes Reyecho. And these weren't ordinary people. These were the heads of the tribe of Reuven. They react. And they say, to Omer, you mean you're going to kill us also through your words? So Moshe Rabbeinu realized that the cat was out of the bag. They were aware that he killed the Egyptian, and ultimately they informed on him. He flees from Mitzrayim. Where does he go? He goes to Midian. Comes to Midian. He sees women shepherdesses are being attacked by men. Moshe, you're a fugitive. Being a fugitive, you realize you have to really lie low. Because if word gets out that this is where you're hiding, Pharaoh's tentacles go far. Moshe Rabbeinu sees an injustice, cannot tolerate it. There's no justice has to be implemented immediately. And he gets into the fray, and he beats these shepherds and protects the women. And ultimately, this was Yisro's daughters. Now, the Gemara tells us in Sanhedrin that mitzvah lasos pshara, that if a judge is able to get the defendants to agree to pshara, to mediation, you should have mediation, not din. Shouldn't have din. Why? Because if you have mediation, they agree to mediation, each party walks away satisfied. But if it's din, which means one's innocent, one's guilty, in that situation, the one person's not going to be happy. So if the judge in any way could convince the parties to agree to mediation, you should have mediation. And Aaron, whenever he would adjudicate, it was always mediation. Moshe Rabbeinu, Yaakov Adin Sahar. That if the mountain was contradictory to Din, Din says, uproot the mountain. There's no intolerance for anything which is not exactly truthful. Mediation is not truth. It's only because they agree. Moshe Rabbeinu never. So I asked, if mitzvah lasas pshara, if there's a mitzvah to encourage mediation, why did Moshe Rabbeinu encourage it? Why is Yaakov Adin Sahar? The answer is because what is Moshe Rabbeinu? Moshe Rabbeinu, what he represents is truth on the absolute level, which is din. If you are a person of din, There's no such thing. There's no room for mediation. Therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu never encouraged or never even suggested mediation. That was Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu, besides saying his neshama was the Quint of Klal Yisrael, he was the conduit for Torah to be given to Klal Yisrael. Since the Torah itself is emes on the absolute level, and Moshe Rabbeinu, the way he behaved and lived his life was on that absolute level, din, therefore, Torah, which is the ultimate, absolute in din, meaning precise, exact, he was the only one who's qualified that he should be the one, that he should be the pass-through, that through him the Torah was given to Klal Yisrael for that reason. So Moshe Rabbeinu is Ish Elokim. He's the man of Elokim. His attribute was Elokim. And therefore he was the only one who was able to tolerate that level of evaluation. That's how the Orach Chaim HaKodesh, I'm just giving you all, embellishing it, giving you the background to appreciate how the Orach Chaim is explaining when the Torah refers to him and identifies him as Ish Elokim, that is the meaning. That's the quantification of Moshe Rabbeinu. So over here, there's a Ramban, very interesting Ramban. Later, the Torah refers to Moshe Rabbeinu as Eved Hashem. Eved Yudke Vavke. He was Ish Elokim. But in terms of when he served, it was Eved Hashem. So take a look at the Ramban over here. Ish Elokim, the Ramban writes, Lahagid ki birchosed muskayemis.
What parak, what pasuk are we?
Right beginning of Zosa Brocha. Aleph, Pasuk Aleph. Lahagid ki birchosed muskayemis. Ish Elokim indicates that his bracha is permanent. Once he gives the bracha, it's something which continues. Ki ish Elokim hoyo utfilas yisharm ritzono. What is the Ratzon of Hashem? What's the will of God? The supplication of those who are Yisharim. Meaning everything do is straight. There's no veering to any side of the issue. It's direct. And the will of Hashem is the supplication of Yisharim. V'hine yikra kosav l'Moshe Rabbeinu ish Elokim. V'chem b'shara neviim v'Eliyav zulosam. We find other neviim are also referred to as Elokim. So it doesn't really work out so well with the Orach Chaim HaKodesh. V'lo yomar kosav ish Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu was not referred to as Ish Hashem, Ish Yudke Vavke. Avayom Moshe Eved Hashem. When we speak about him being the servant, he's the servant of Hashem. Ish Elokim. But in terms of Eved, he's Yudke Vavke. Vatam Yudua L'chol Maskir. He says, and understanding why in one context it's Elokim, in the other context it's Hashem, people who have an understanding understand why. Chen al derech emes. Based derech emes means on a Kabbalistic level. V'zosi abrocha. Ki me'ez Hashem hoysezos. What is the brocha? Understand that all brocha emanates from Hashem. Me'ez Hashem. V'chein b'Yakov nemar v'zos Hashem dibel hem aviem v'zos abrocha hoyselik derech. Yirmos Letzion David ki Sham Tziva Hashem is Habrocha. I think the Ramban himself is saying Vamaskil Yovin. He's saying if you understand, meaning the Ramban says very often, if you understand it, you understand it. If you don't understand, you don't understand it, because it's rooted in the Kabbalah, and if you have that understanding, but it can't divulge more. Meaning, the person, Moshe Rabbeinu, all these people, they understand the bracha emanates from Hashem. That's Ish Elokim. Whenever it speaks of bracha, it comes from the Elokim. The bracha comes from Elokim. But they themselves are Eved Hashem. I mean, I'm not sure exactly why, but we speak about being a servant, you're a servant of Yud Kei Vav Kei. When we speak about giving a bracha, the bracha emanates from Elokim. Okay? So it could be, and the idea is, of course, it means it's Mekuyemis. Because the will of Hashem is the will of the Yeshorim. The Yeshorim, because the Yeshorim, their perspective is what is God's perspective. So when they give a bracha, God confirms that bracha and makes sure that bracha actually comes to fruition, is actualized. That's what the Ramban is saying. But it's unclear why, when it comes to Eved Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei. Could be, even though the appellation Yud Kei Vav Kei stands for Midas HaRachmim, but when Moshe Rabbeinu was chosen to be the Goel and he came, Hashem said, Moshe Rabbeinu says, how should I refer to you? So he says, Shmi la'olam zichri l'dovador. Shmi, my name is la'olam forever, and my remembrance is from generation to generation. So the word la'olam is written la'aleim. La'aleim means it should be concealed. The pronouncement of Yud Kei Vav Kei should be concealed. And therefore Yud Kei Vav Kei, we don't pronounce it as it's written, but rather the pronunciation of Yud Kei Vav Kei is Adni, as if it would be spelled like Odom, Aleph Daled Nun, although it's Yud Kei Vav Kei, right? It's La'aleim. Why is Yud Kei Vav Kei? Why are you not permitted to pronounce the Yud Kei Vav Kei? What's the reason? What does Yud Kei Vav Kei stand for? Hoya Hovaviyah. He was, he is, and he's in the future. When we speak about Hashem being in the future, what does that mean? He's in the future. He knows the future, or he's in the future. Hashem has to be in the future. He was, he is, and in the future. Because if Hashem is infinite, there's no beginning, there's no end. If the future hasn't yet taken place, that means God, the future is not here yet. So if God is absolute and encompasses everything, automatically he's in the future. But we have a question. We being finite beings, we can't relate to how could he be in the future if the future hasn't taken place? The reality is, if you believe God is infinite, God is already in the future. That's the reason why the Torah says La'aleim. You don't pronounce Yud Kei Vav Kei as it's written. You pronounce it as master. Although the essence is something which is, there's no beginning, there's no end. But in terms of the essence of what it is, it's Yud Kei Vav Kei. So I think it says that's Eved Hashem. Eved Hashem means you're negated. The ultimate concept of Echod, which Reb Chaim Volozhin writes in Nefesh Chaim, is not possible to even fathom. Because the question is, if Hashem is infinite and there's no place he's not, so where's the place for us? Right? So who are we? So the Reb Chaim Volozhin writes Nefesh Chaim, something which is not understood. As human beings, we can't relate to this, but we have to live our lives as we perceive things and as we're endowed with our intelligence within the context of finite. Hashem's in heaven. Hashem's in Shemayim. We're here, but Hashem's all over. Because every aspect of existence is an expression of who he is. There's nowhere where he's not. He says, there's a law, that if a location is unclean, you have human feces, you're not permitted to study Torah there. I mean, what a feces? What if feces exists? What does anything exist? Because he wills that existence. That's an extension of himself. So how do we understand it? The answer is you don't understand it. Humanly, it's not possible to understand these things. So that's what it means. In terms of who the person is, Eved Hashem, he's the Eved of Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's who he is. The reason why he's negated to that is because he understands that he's finite and Hashem's Yud Kei Vav Kei is infinite. And therefore he serves the ultimate. The master at this level is because he is infinite. The pronunciation is master, but what is the context of this master? The context of this master is Yud Kei Vav Kei. Hoya Hovliya. That's the way I understand it. Shem Hashem Ekra Hovel Godel Elokeinu. When you enunciate the name of Hashem, you give greatness, acknowledgement to that. So Rashi over there says in the Beis Hamikdash, when the Kohen Gadol mentioned the name of Hashem, he mentioned it in its pronunciation. He actually said it the way it was written, not the way we pronounce it. That's known as the Shem HaMeforish. That's the way he said it. In the Beis Hamikdash, the Kohen Gadol did say it. Outside Beis Hamikdash, you don't say it. What is the Beis Hamikdash? That's God. That domain is a domain also. That's God's domain. In God's domain, you speak about Hashem as you're supposed to speak about him, which is Yud Kei Vav Kei. And it's full, there's no la'alein. There's no concealment of the way that's supposed to be expressed and enunciated. And this is Hashem speak. This is not me. Outside the Beis Hamikdash, it's la'aleim. La'olam la'aleim. The vav is deleted to mean la'aleim. But in the Beis Hamikdash, there you say it in its full as its spelling is, its full pronunciation. Because even the Beis Hamikdash, we said one of the miracles in the Beis Hamikdash was, which has to do with Yom Kippur coming now. Omdim tzfufim shtachim revochim. They stood when they stood in the Beis Hamikdash during the avoda. All the Jews were there; they were pressed together, and when they heard the Shem Hashem, they would prostrate themselves, and there was sufficient room for full prostration. Yeah, one moment they're pressed, where if you lift your feet off the floor, you don't fall. That's how pressed together you are. But the moment you hear the Shem Hashem and you want to prostrate yourself, and they did prostrate, there was sufficient space for full prostration. How does it work? You realize the walls didn't expand. It was a context of out of worldliness, because you were in the location of the infinite. There's no such thing as time and space. As a result of that, when they had to acknowledge what Hashem is, there's no such thing as limitation. When you have that level of negation to him. I said something interesting in the past. Omdim tzfufim, mishtachvim u'vochim. What is the concept of prostration? Prostration is total negation. When you stand, I stand. That's my identity. I am. If you are, you have no relevance. That means you function within the context of nature. The moment you don't exist any longer, and the reason why you're negating yourself is because you heard the Shem Hashem, then it's only God. When you're only dealing with Hashem, you can prostrate yourself because you're not limited to the time and space any longer. Therefore, when they heard the Shem Hashem and they prostrated themselves, which is an act of total negation and like the dust of the earth, therefore there was sufficient room for full prostration.
Going back to the blessing.
Ramchal explains, it's a whole discussion. If a person converts to Judaism, a non-Jewish soul is not the same as a Jewish soul. So how, Mark, this is very important. If a person undergoes conversion and meets all the specifications which are set by the Torah, but mikvah, or if it's a male, it's milah, tefillah, and you have a sincere acceptance of the mitzvahs and belief. If you go through that process in the presence of a bezdin, the person is converted to be a Jew. And now he has a different neshama. He has a different soul. I mean, before he had a Gentile soul, a Noahide soul. Now he has this mega soul. Right? Now the question is, how does that metamorphosis, how does that transition take place? Through the conversion process. So the Ramchal explains, he refers to Klal Yisrael as an Elon. We are a tree. And each of us a branch of that tree because of what took place at Sinai. The non-Jew converts he's becoming part of that tree. See, every branch which is natural to the tree, that it's the tree. It's naturally part of the tree. We speak Yudei Shvatim, 12 tribes, all that. Something which is not naturally part of the tree. What about if you graft it onto the tree? The non-Jew converting, that's the grafting process. And if you want to be grafted perfectly to become part of the spiritual ecology of the tree, you have to meet the specifications which are set by the Torah, which is Mila, Tefillah, Kabbalah, Mitzvahs, in the presence of the Besdin. That's how that graft takes place. And if you do it right, you become part of that spiritual ecology. That's how the convert becomes the Jew. And the neshama now, like you graft a branch onto a tree, eventually that branch will start producing the fruits of the tree. Identity, the neshama takes on a different dimension now. But does it have its own natural identity? It doesn't. It's grafted on. Okay? So the Ramchal says, takes it further. Hashem is infinite. We're finite. If you want to become part of an infinite system, how do you become part of an infinite system? Not your infinite, but have become part of the infinite by grafting yourself onto Hashem. It's called dveikus, emulating his ways, his characteristics, through saying 100 brachos a day, acknowledging in a certain way, that allows you to attach yourself. And once you're attached to where he prescribes it, then you become part of an infinite system. That's the Ramchal in the Das Tvunos.